The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 21st chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. When some were speaking about the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, Jesus said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down." They asked him, "Teacher, when will this be? And what will be the sign that this is about to take place?" And he said, "Beware that you are not led astray. For many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and 'the time is near.' Don't go after them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, don't be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, and in various places famines and plagues. And there will be dreadful portents and great signs from heaven. But before all this occurs, they will arrest you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. So make up your minds not to prepare your defense in advance, for I will give you words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be betrayed, even by parents and brothers, by relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. You will be hated by all because of my name. But not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your souls." This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. You may be seated. All right. The very first night of my very first week at camp, I remember that there was an extra counselor. I don't know if she was the supervisor or if she didn't have a regular job that week or what. All I remember is that when some of us 11-year-old campers were terrified to walk all the way to the outhouse by ourselves after dark, she was willing to go with us. And yes, she even went in first to check for spiders in the corners. She did not have to do that. It was not her job. She could have just said, "There's nothing to be afraid of, get over it." She could have said, "I won't be here to do this tomorrow, so you need to learn to do it on your own." Instead, she said, "I'll go with you." And that mattered. It was one simple incident, not that noteworthy compared to everything else that happened that week, but I've come to realize that it taught me an important lesson. When someone's afraid, it rarely helps to just say, "Well, don't be afraid." If you are an angel delivering good news, then fine, you can say that. But for humans, "There's nothing to be afraid of, get over it," doesn't work. At best, it makes people feel stupid and embarrassed, like they shouldn't be afraid in the first place. At worst, when you're really afraid and somebody tells you not to be, it makes you feel like you are all alone. And alone and afraid is a bad combination. But I'll go with you is a good thing to say to someone who's afraid. It might not make the fear go away, but it can make it better. And it doesn't just help with the half-formed fears of a child. I'll go with you is also a powerful response to the more nuanced fears of adults. As adults, we know that sometimes we're afraid for no good reason. But more often, we're afraid because there are things that can hurt us. That's definitely true of the kind of stuff Jesus is talking about today. Wars and insurrections, earthquakes, famine and plagues, betrayal, hate, death. These aren't so much signs of the apocalypse as they are your daily news checklist. There has never been a time in human history when all of these things weren't happening. Every audience has always said, oh, that sounds like today. So yeah, there's times in the Bible where it says, don't be afraid. But angels can say that because they are the thing that's scary. Jesus knows that the stuff he's talking about is scary because it might kill you. So instead of just saying, well, don't be afraid, he says, do not be terrified. The word that he uses, it's not the usual word for just plain fear. It's more like a serious, gut-wrenching terror. The kind that freezes you in your tracks. The kind that erases all thought. The kind where you can't eat. You can't sleep. You can't even take care of the people you love most. That's the kind of terror Jesus tells his friends they don't have to feel. He knows they will be afraid. He knows better than to tell them not to be. That never helps. But even though they are afraid, they don't have to feel that horrible, mind-numbing, soul-destroying terror. Why not? Because I will give you words, he says. How can he do that unless he's right there with them? How can he know what words they need if he is somewhere far away? If he is going to give them words, he has to be close enough to whisper in their ears. In other words, Jesus tells his friends, when you're afraid, I'll go with you. And he did. And he does. There's nowhere that Jesus won't go with you. There is nowhere that Jesus won't go for you. Jesus will even go with you to death. And since he is risen from the dead, even death need not hold you terrified. Today, there are many people who are afraid for good reason. Maybe you're one of them. There's a lot to fear: illness, violence, death, loss. We might fear different plagues, different wars, different famines, but the root fears are the same. And unfortunately, there's never been a time in human history when those fears weren't justified. Maybe the worst of our fears will never materialize. I hope that the worst of our fears will never materialize. But there is evil in the world, and you never really know what is lurking in the corners. In the face of that, we have choices. We can pretend it doesn't exist. We can look the other way and let it happen. We can loudly insist that it's not real, so no one should be afraid. All of that is about as helpful as telling a child, just get over it. Or we can do our very best to say, when you're afraid, I'll go with you. If you have to go into the unknown, I will be there. I will shine my flashlight into the shadows. And if I find something there that is scary, I won't leave you alone to face it. Not even if I'm scared too. Remember, Jesus promises to be with us when we're afraid. And the way that we usually know that he is with us is when other people are with us. Jesus speaks to us in the words of other people, and he speaks to other people in our words. Maybe you're afraid right now. That's fine. You don't have to feel stupid or embarrassed about that, because you're not alone. Jesus is with you. Maybe you're not at all afraid right now. That's okay too. Jesus is with you. But although all of us are afraid at one time or another, we are not overwhelmed with terror because we are not alone. We are not silenced by fear because Jesus gives us words. We are not frozen by dread because Jesus will always go with us. In our fear, as in our hope, Jesus always goes with us. So in his name, all God's people say, Amen.